And when they went to the queen to tell her subjects had no bread, do you know what she said?
Let them eat cake.
Here, take the bomb.
We're getting screwed, man. Every time we turn around, we're getting screwed. Oh, the revolution's going to be through podcasting for sure. That's the only way we talk. It's the little guys that take the brunt of everything. It's got to stop. Peasants, man. We're just peasants. Every one of us. You watch those old movies, you see the peasants in the background with the kings and queens walking around. We're those people. We're those people. Good morning, peasants. Welcome to another episode of the Peasants Perspective. My microphone does not sound right. Give me just a second here. There we go. How's that? That should make a difference. Maybe. Yep, that should make a difference. Oh, sorry, folks. Gotta make sure this works. Let me turn that up a little bit. All right. Well, gosh, that doesn't sound very good. Look at me, always having sound problems, having some issue on my own. All right, well, I'm here. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Sarah Singh says, good morning. Sarah Singh, I was just thinking about you the other day. Sarah Singh says, good morning, Thundering Oak. Good morning, Shantini. Good morning, Carlito and Tiffany. Good morning, everyone. Got a case of the Mondays. Oh, my goodness, me too. Carlitos, good morning. Marizo, good morning from Meridian, Idaho. Marizo, you're back home. That's amazing. Sounds fine. Thundering Oak, sounds good. Well, I'm glad I'm sound good because it just sounded a little bit funny to me. But I put these headphones on. I kind of wanted to, I overheard my wife listening to the podcast and I was like, that sound. But, you know, I'm the most critical person of my own sound of anybody there is. So no surprise there. Okay. So I don't really know where to fit in this study. So we'll start on something after we do the simultaneous sip, which is what it is time for now is the simultaneous sip. And all you need for that is a cup or a mug or a glass, a tankard, a chalice, a stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled of the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better. But you got to give me just a little second here. Still got some issues. I got issues. Hold on. Almost time for the simultaneous sip. And the simultaneous sip starts right now.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so
I can't take anymore. That's being called the worst national anthem that's ever been sung in 250 years. And it was at the Women's National Baseball League. And it was a women's baseball game. that was the national anthem. Probably the worst anthem in 250 years. Oh, that's pretty good. Pony Boy says, good morning. Pony Boy, glad you made it. Okay, check this out, folks. This is just interesting. I don't really know what to think of it. So check this out. Polymarket reports, and then I double check this on Grok. Groundbreaking U.S. government study shows Viagra may be instrumental in stopping the spread of cancer. So it is a good time to get up and stop cancer. Somebody out there is laughing. I know somebody's out there is laughing. Okay. All right, so we do have some really sad things happening. However, sorry, I'm still laughing at my own joke. We do have some really sad things happening out in Spokane, Washington. We've had some absolutely devastating fires over the weekend, or I guess one specific fire over the weekend. So here's an image of this fire. This is, like I said, really catastrophic. I've spent a little bit of time out in Spokane this last year. It is a fun city.
Look at this shit. Oh,
Something's being weird here. Oh, it's playing picture-in-picture. All right, so I'm going to turn the volume down because obviously you already heard a little bit of a treat there. So here is what's going on over in Spokane. For me, it's over in Spokane. But you've had basically a whole neighborhood that's just been devastated. And they have evacuated. Here's a daylight picture. Look at this. They have evacuated about 60,000 people out of Spokane, which is like, by the way, and I don't know if it's Spokane Valley proper, but 60,000 people is like, a fifth of the population of the area. it's if not more. That's a lot of people to evacuate for that area. Anyways, you see this, just look at that, just whole neighborhoods. So this is not something that's an impossibility out here in the West, but it is, uncommon to lose whole neighborhoods. It's typically been a California problem. Hasn't usually been too much of a Washington, Oregon problem per se. So our Governor Ferguson, had a conversation with Donald Trump, and I'm presuming to ask for aid. And apparently it went really well. This is probably the first nice thing Governor Ferguson has ever said about Donald Trump coming out of his mouth here.
I will just say I can't speak to the past. I wasn't governor then. But what I can say is I deeply appreciate the president taking time. I think I requested a conversation. I'm losing track of the hours here today, but just a few hours ago. And I was on the phone with him literally a couple hours later. And I had the clear sense he understood what was going on. I had the clear sense he'd been briefed on what was going on. He was knowledgeable about the situation. And I appreciated that.
I'm glad. So Donald Trump was informed and he appreciated that. That's pretty good. Here's Fox News sharing a little news blip. Obviously, it's made national news. You lose a whole neighborhood to fire and news is going to
right along North Trails Road. I mean, this is the old trail fire, and this is just one out of several homes that have been completely leveled by this firestorm just yesterday. I'm told by neighbors here in this community that this was an assisted living home. So we had about 4 seniors living here, and just taking a look at the gray ash, the rubble, just this downed infrastructure is just really such a heartbreaking scene here. And I think too, looking at that brick chimney and seeing how that is still standing, but then also the smoke that is just rising from this area. And I want to pan just a little bit to show you this vehicle too. Nothing left but the skeletal outline. And this is a similar image that we're really seeing just around this roadway here. And if we even pan just a little bit more, this is a cause for concern. We see that a gas line is still on. So hence that fire that you're seeing over there. We do have utility crews on site working to mend all of this at the current moment. But I think what's really interesting too, Charles, my photographer, if we could pan across the street and show the homes that are currently still standing. And I think it goes to show you the spotty nature of a fire that we're dealing with when it's so wind driven like it was yesterday. John, you mentioned the 45-mile-an-hour wind gust. I mean, that is nearing the strength of hurricane force winds. And so that leads to the spotty nature because you have these embers that are being picked up.
Not nearing the force of hurricane winds. In fact, that's worth a fact check. What are the wind speeds for hurricane winds? Okay. I have a feeling it's going to be a lot more than 40 miles per hour. Let's see, the hurricane wind scale. So this is, I may as well just share this with you guys since we're just having a casual morning here. Okay, so category 1 hurricane would be 74 to 95 miles per hour. Very dangerous, and winds will produce some damage. So 45 miles an hour. Sorry, not approaching hurricane winds. That's about half the speed of hurricanes. But nonetheless, we'll forgive the news reporter for sharing that. It is actually very tragic what's going on over there. Obviously, Spokane. I mean, it's Washington State. This is like the hometown fire here. But it's very tragic. One of the things that Spencer Pratt put out this weekend, because obviously LA has had their own fires, and that's what was the impetus for him running for mayor. But he put out that fires are weapons of mass destruction. And he's absolutely correct, right? If an arsonist lights on a fire and it causes untold amounts of damage, I mean, that's a weapon of mass destruction, and it's terrorism, frankly. And there's no allegation that I have seen at all that these fires in Spokane are set, man-made fires. It's not an impossibility. If you know the area, it's dry as a tinderbox this time of year, but it's also very possible this was a thunderstorm or just, semi-natural human causes, a cigarette butt out a window. I mean, I don't know. Haven't heard anything. I'll let you guys know if I hear what was the cause of it. But the idea that fires can really cause some serious damage. And one of the other things is, as a weapon of mass destruction, our leaders are responsible to put out these fires, right? Like having enough fire break, having enough engineering around your subdivisions so that wildfires can't come right up to them. That's probably something that, I mean, if they're going to do everything they do for zoning, you think that one would make sense. Obviously, water in California has been a big issue, making sure that the firemen have water available to them to fight fires. So all of those things kind of add up, right? Like you could think these fires can just break out at any time. You'd want to be, pretty much prepared for them. And it's tricky. Now, the other thing too, especially if coming from the West is vast, right? So preparing for a fire, you can be as prepared as you want to be prepared. And when you start talking about fires that come in and, with 1,000-acre fronts, it almost doesn't matter how much prep you have. A county in a city the size of Spokane isn't going to have enough firefighters for something like that. So the only way you can really prevent it is prepping the burn path to our cities. So I don't know. Thundering Oak says, we have an aunt out in Spokane. Don't know how she's doing yet. Yeah, we have a community member out in Spokane as well. Sarah Sings, she says, I hope she's doing okay. Thundering Oak, thanks at Sarah Sings. I'm just reading back their conversation, you guys. Thundering Oak, I'm curious why the homes and cars are burnt, but the trees are not. I think these aren't like, okay, so I have been through a forest fire. And sometimes we see the most violent of images where you see a big front of fire, but really a lot of these forest fires do kind of pop up in these little patches. And so, once the house starts burning, the neighbors, in the case like that, we're across the street. If the neighbors are home, they're probably outside of their house with a hose spraying off their roof. I don't think that's super uncommon to have kind of like spotty fires and stuff like that. The other thing too is fires will rush through the underbrush and leave the trees. So you will see, like in that case, we saw a picture of trees all around that are green. They're pine trees. They don't really burn like that, but everything below them is burnt. And that's actually how their pine cones open up and release the seeds, is fire. So they're like ready for the fires. That's why the trees aren't always burnt, or just the canopy's burnt and it'll grow back the next year. So along with kind of the dystopian catastrophe happening over in Spokane, over in Idaho Falls, they had their own dystopian catastrophe as well. Now, Idaho Falls is a small town.
Now that there's more information available,
it's about 2 hours east, hour and a half, 2 hours east of Boise. It's about 3 hours northwest of Salt Lake City. So it's part of the Snake River Valley, and it's a really interesting town. There's a huge Snake River Gorge there. In fact, it's where Evel Knievel tried to jump the Snake River, was right there, right outside of Twin Falls. So anyways, Twin Falls had an active shooter situation at an In-N-Out Burger. So in my circles, being from Idaho originally, I've been hearing a lot about this. This was kind of one of those like not in my hometown kind of things. This is something that you constantly expect to hear from our major cities. We don't expect to hear about stuff like this coming out from little towns like Twin Falls. Twin Falls is considered a safe haven, is where people go to raise their kids quietly in a small, southern Idaho town. I don't know what the current population of Twin Falls is. I assisted in building the Mormon temple that's out there. So I spent some time there, and I've passed through it a million times. And so I don't know what the population is, but when I was growing up, it was like 50 grand. Right now, it might be like 100 grand or something like that. But they had a shooter out in Idaho Falls. It's just tragic. So this is, of all the information, because it was really fragmented information coming in, this is the best compilation of what happened that I've seen. Again, we're starting to kind of live in a dystopian world, which is going to matter here in a couple minutes.
Now that there's more information available, I wanted to people trying to flee as this was unfolding. And apparently an In-N-Out employee was seen dragging a wounded female coworker who had been shot in the chest across the parking lot, getting her into a vehicle to get her to a hospital. There was also a video of a civilian who was a bystander near the event that was armed with a pistol that returned fire at the gunman in an effort to stop him. And social media posts and social media users are speculating it's a guy by the name of Jordan Salinas. Now, that's not confirmed by any law enforcement or any official authorities yet. That's still kind of like just speculation, so take that with a grain of salt. But the dude did post the video on his YouTube channel that was him training at sundown doing desert drills with the suppressed FN57 USG. And it looked very similar to the way that he looked in the video that was recorded of him. Now, again, we don't know for sure that's the same guy, but a lot of people speculate it is. The Twin Falls chief of police came out during a press conference after the situation had been determined to be over. And he said that the gunman was deceased due to self-inflicted wounds after the attack. And officials stated that the threat to the community was over and that there was only one shooter outside of the bystander that was trying to engage that one shooter. Now, city spokesperson Josh Palmer ended up reporting that 3 people have been killed and that 7 people were injured, some critically, and they were taken to St. Luke's Magic Valley Medical Center. In-N-Out Burger and the CEO of In-N-Out put out a statement on social media about this incident, and I wanted to read that to you guys because I thought that was pretty important. So they said, quote, "To my dear In-N-Out family, customers, and friends and families to both. My heart is broken, my chest is heavy, my eyes burn from the tears I've shed. We lost one of our beautiful associates tonight. She was taking care of our most important asset, our customers. And her life was taken by a disgusting human who doesn't value the life of others or his own. He shot both on our property and off and ended his life shortly after he took the precious lives of our associate and customers, innocent people who never saw it coming. In-N-Out will be mourning with the families and praying for them as they tread through a very painful season. I am no stranger to loss, but this is so incredibly tough. And my heart goes out to all the associates and the customers who were there during this traumatic event. I love you all, and I ask you to turn to God, not in anger, but seeking comfort and strength for those who are hurting. We will stand together and we will do everything we can to learn from this situation. Love and God bless you. Lindsay and family."
So what's particularly tragic about this is Mata says it happened at a Tesla charging center, and it didn't actually happen at a Tesla charging center. This is the scene right here. I'll share this with you again. This is the scene right here where the young man is shooting into a Tesla. So this is, I believe, the charging center is at the In-N-Out, possibly, or right next to it. And there's actually a husband and wife. I believe they were up from Utah in that Tesla while it was charging, and they were unable to get away because the Tesla was charging, and they wouldn't get out of the Tesla to unplug it to drive away. And they ended up getting shot point blank through their Tesla. So very sad image there. Yeah, it's quite the dystopian world. Elon Musk posted this, and this is kind of where I wanted to go with this today. He says, "You watch the Hunger Games and you sided with the resistance. You watch Star Wars and you sided with the resistance. You watch The Matrix and you sided with the resistance. You watched Divergent and sided with the resistance. You watched V for Vendetta and sided with the resistance. When it's fiction, you understand. Yet you refuse to see it when it's the reality you're living in. Wild." So Elon Musk posted that. That's pretty good. Which kind of brings us to our next thing, right? Obviously, last week we had Anthony Fauci go to Congress and testify. And this weekend on the weekend shows on State of the Union with Dana Bash, RFK Jr. came on. And this was 20 minutes of must-see cable news TV. It was absolutely amazing. Okay. And it's very, we're going to watch a couple clips. We can't watch all of it, obviously. We're going to watch a couple clips. We're going to watch 2 longer clips, and there might be a little bit of overlap. I apologize if there is. It's just the nature of how these clips get cut. But this first clip is going to go through, again, on my algorithm. All I saw yesterday evening was RFK. It was like one clip after another. In fact, there was like no other news other than these RFK clips, it seemed like. So there's lots of great clips. This first clip has most of the great clips that you see circulating are in this clip. So we'll watch this and then we'll break it down. this dystopian universe, right? One of the things RFK is going to tell Dana Bash here is you were part of the problem. And he's in referencing CNN, but her specifically too, right? You were part of the problem. You just repeat what you're told. He really goes after this mockingbird media concept that these guys were, trust the experts, and totally infatuated with that whole thing. And they bear some blame for what happened during COVID. So this was a beautiful interview. And you have to remember something about Dana Bash. Her ex-husband, who she kept his last name Bash, her ex-husband was one of the 51 or 53 signatories on the Hunter Biden's laptop is Russian disinformation letter, right? He is a deep stater, and she was married to him up until after Trump, allegedly lost the 2020 election. At some point they separated, but she kept his last name. So she is part of the deep state apparatus. Like 1000%. She's part of that control structure that the media is. So let's listen to this exchange. It is wonderful.
Did you say probing the link?
I'm just quoting the Wall Street Journal, that the president wants you to go further to probe the link between autism and vaccines.
He certainly does.
Okay. Now, have you talked to him about medical research that have studied this for 25 years and found no link between autism and vaccines? And just this is my question here, because I don't want to litigate that. My question is, why not, because you are HHS secretary now, why not study what could cause autism, which scientists do believe starts with fetal brain development? Why not do some studies on that, whether you're an environmental lawyer, whether there are environmental factors that go into contributing to a predisposed genetic situation?
Well, let me say this first. We're doing all those things. And that's one of the ways we found Tylenol. There's 73 studies out there.
Okay, so she goes, why don't we study what could cause autism as opposed to what does cause autism? It's an interesting small little play on words there. And nobody would ever intentionally say that. If they do, they're the most nefarious people you can imagine. But unconsciously, when you say something like that, well, why don't you study what could cause it? Why don't we just study what causes it? Do you see the quick play there? Like, well, why don't we study the stuff that we know doesn't cause it, that could cause it? Like DNA. That's what she's implying there.
We're doing all those things. And that's one of the ways that we found Tylenol. There's 73 studies out there and linked Tylenol exposure during later pregnancy and during the perinatal period to autism onset. But you are wrong when you say that this issue has been studied. It has been studied, and you're rolling your eyes, Dana. But
I am, because I don't want to have you use our air to say this. There have been more than 40 studies involving 5.6 million people to conclude there is no link between vaccines and autism. This is the head of the Committee of Infectious Diseases for the American Academy of Pediatrics.
And now let me tell you what the Institute of Medicine says, which is the National Academy of Sciences, which is the ultimate arbiter on vaccine safety, and which it does not have an interest in this debate. It says that none of the 8 vaccines that are administered during the first 6 months of life have ever been studied for relationship to autism. It found 2 studies, one on the DTP vaccine that showed that it does cause autism, and one on the hepatitis B vaccine that again suggests that it does cause autism. The Institute of Medicine dismissed those 2 studies because they were based on CDC's database. The studies that you're referring to are all for one vaccine, the MMR vaccine, or one ingredient, thimerosal.
So you are actually looking at, you're starting new studies to try to link autism, but you're also telling me—
I'm not trying to link autism to anything. I'm trying to find out, why is autism gone?
Are you also trying to find out how it interacts with people's DNA, what's predisposed to have an autistic child? Are you doing both?
Okay. This is actually important to understand, because this is going to come into more play here. Really important to understand. Once you see this, you can't really unsee it. In the Bible, there's a verse, I can't remember exactly where it's at. It's in the Old Testament. Beware of those who worship death. Okay. Beware of those who worship death. Beware of those who make death their muse, their idol. Okay. Even if it's just to avoid a death, anytime you glorify something and make it start to respect it, to fear it, it becomes your idol. And so here she's saying, well, what if it's part of the DNA? This is one of the tropes about autism, is that somehow autism is genetic and that there's just environmental triggers, an allergy, some environmental presence in the womb, any number of things. But they want us to go down this genetic rabbit hole and go start checking DNA. First of all, it just creates a whole lot more testing. So there's one thing. There's a whole industrial complex around testing and stuff like that. But more than anything, by trying to say it's genetic, what they're going to do, and they're already doing this in countries like Canada, well, if you have any genetic predisposition to anything, which, because autism is not genetic, and I think they've pretty conclusively shown that, because autism is not really genetic, and the commonalities amongst everybody with autism genetically are tangential at best. It's like partial, like, 51% of people with autism have this gene combination. It's like, whatever. Because of that, it's a dead end. And it will cause people to sterilize themselves because, I have a genetic disposition to pass on, the autism gene or whatever. It'll cause people to sterilize themselves. It'll cause a huge increase in abortion because they'll test babies in the fetus. So remember, most people that you meet with autism, you don't know they have autism or a mental problem until they start talking or, doing something that's out of the ordinary. You'd never know that in the womb. And all of a sudden genetic testing would lead to a whole probably rise in abortions amongst the upper middle class. It could be really bad. Once you know that that's a motive, and I'll prove it to you here in a second, you'll see that over and over again, especially with vaccines. We actually know that genetics are not the cause of it. Mock my words. That'll be proven over time. And it's already proven, but the powers that be don't want you to know that.
Yeah, but Dana, you probably don't understand this because you're not a scientist, but genes
you're not either.
Genes don't cause epidemics.
I understand. Genes,
they can provide a vulnerability.
A gene provides environmental. That's what I'm asking. Are you studying the environmental
We're looking
exposure?
at all the different environmental exposures, but your statement, you have been fooled. Your statement that this has been studied is not true. It's categorically not true. Not for any of this stuff.
It is considered
by who?
By every scientist who has studied this.
That is not true. I can give you hundreds of scientists who have looked at this.
So on the one hand, do you understand why people aren't getting
Academy of Sciences? What greater authority
do you understand why people are not getting measles vaccines? Because they're hearing you say that it could cause
You're trying
autism.
to change the subject.
I'm not. It's very much related.
Show me one of the studies that's been done on the first 8 the vaccines during the first 6 months of life. You will not find them. The National Academy of Sciences.
So if that's the case, then why are you telling people to get the measles vaccine?
Because that is one of the vaccines that has been studied.
Okay.
It's the only one that has been studied.
Do you want people to get the MMR vaccine?
Yeah, I said that already.
Okay, so
I know you're flustered now, and it is.
I'm not frustrated at all.
Because
I am frustrated.
And honest.
The reason I'm frustrated is because you are the HHS. You are the HHS secretary, and you are talking about things that lead to vaccine hesitancy in this country, and it is something that causes problems for people when there is not anything.
Let me ask you something. Do you see your job as ending vaccine hesitancy, or do you see your job as telling the truth?
Do you see your job as ending vaccine hesitancy or telling the truth? What if in some hypothetical situation, encouraging people to be so vaccine accepting and getting multiple boosters will not stop the spread of COVID, will actually increase the spread of COVID, will cause autoimmune deficiency problems amongst a huge portion of the population that gets the vaccine? What if we knew that giving little babies before the age of 6 months, 40-something vaccines causes all kinds of environmental problems with their DNA and their development and things like that? What if? What if the truth would lead you to the conclusion that you're doing self-harm and institutional harm to our children and to people who get vaccines? What if that was the truth? Would vaccine hesitancy and removing that be the goal? or would that be the objective? Right? So RFK makes an interesting point there. Is getting rid of vaccine hesitancy the goal?
American people.
I see my job as telling the truth, and the truth is that there is study after study after study. It's one of the most studied things out there in science.
You're repeating
and it
it
is
like a parrot. You're repeating
So are
it
you.
like a parrot.
So
I've actually read the science. Let's you and
don't
I
wanna-
come
you don't
back
wanna-
here and debate the
So
science.
I'm not debating this with you.
Of course you won't.
No, because I'm not
all you
debating
know how to
all-
do is repeat things that people told you and say, trust the experts. That's what you did during COVID. Now we know that Anthony Fauci, who was the expert, was lying about everything, about masks, about social distancing, about natural immunity, about the transmission from the vaccine, about the source of COVID. He was lying, and you were punishing people for not trusting the experts. And now you're rolling out the experts again.
Yes.
To talk about something that you have no personal knowledge of.
Okay, well, guess what? That is my job, to talk to people.
Your job is to
Am I
tell the
allowed
truth
to talk?
to the American
Yes,
public.
yes. And my job
And
is
to
to
be-
get as
and
much
to-
information as I
And to
can. And
maintain
what we were doing,
a posture
what we were
of
doing,
fierce skepticism
what we
toward
were
government
doing
authority.
in COVID and still with regard to these vaccines is getting the best information, the best science that we can.
And they got the crappiest information and the crappiest science they can. He's so good at that. Carlite says, Bobby for president. Yeah, he'll probably make another run at it. I wouldn't be surprised. Robin Delane says, happy day. I'm back, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So glad to have you. So glad to have you. Okay, so that was an excellent interview. We'll play another clip of that here in just a moment. And so Anna Kasparian over the weekend, we talked about this last week. We saw this a little ahead of schedule. Okay. Obviously any critique could go, the Democrat Party is fractured. But a couple of weeks ago, we're like, they're talking. The noise is coming out. They're starting to say the things. This little internal strife between the Democrats and the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, the far left wing of the party, is starting to come out. Anna Kasparian, on her show this weekend, The Young Turks, she made a huge admission, and this is not the first admission this week. And remember, last week we had Bill Maher. So in my opinion, these guys are kind of vying for that independent, middle of the ground Democrat, reasonable Democrats. They don't want the far lefties. Although, in fairness, Anna Kasparian and the Young Turks have fostered the far left lefties. They've been there, it kind of like what War Room is to the right wing now with Steve Bannon is what Young Turks has been to kind of the Bernie Sanders bros for many, many years. It's their rally point. It's the point where they go and they kind of get their intellectual talking points from Sek Younger and Anna Kasparian. So Anna Kasparian this weekend, this is a big deal. There's a lot of quote unquote Bernie bros who watch this show.
The one thing that I think the conservative Americans were correct about, especially as it pertained to the pandemic, was questioning authority and questioning our institutions. When the pandemic began, I had too much trust in our institutions. I have now switched over to having zero trust in our institutions. And when you have zero trust in our institutions, you're more likely to land at the accurate information.
Yes. And that is why when I was coming out of college with a political science degree, arguably from one of the most conservative schools in the country, I was like, no trust in government. These people lie to you all the time. And that was 20 years ago. Okay. That was before we had a real live show of 20 years of all the nonsense stacked up on top of each other in ever increasingly compressed timeframes. So yes, distrust of government has long been a liberal a classical liberal perspective, right? I mean, this was the whole founding fathers' motive was don't trust the government, fracture the power so that no one man holds it. So given all of that, it's kind of like this is a good thing, right? This fracture in the Democrat Party is a good thing because if they're divided, they won't win. And what you're going to find is some Anna Kasparians, Bill Maher's, as we get closer to the election, you're going to see them really waffle on these DSA candidates who are the premier candidates for the Democrat Party. It's going to be a huge, huge problem for them. So RFK continued talking in this interview with Dana Bash, and he starts getting asked about gain of function. Because remember, this is the big smoking gun. The United States was funding gain of function. Anthony Fauci knew about it. This was in violation of the law. Okay. So, and it was the cover up. Like, if there was a thing that the United States and the media wanted to cover up more than anything else, let's pretend everything else happened completely like you would expect with a pandemic, and they tried to roll out lockdowns. Pretend this was Ebola. They kind of did their thing. The system couldn't tell the difference between a cold virus and Ebola, and it ran the Ebola game plan on us. But the reason that they had to do that, one of the reasons that they clearly had to do this, is because they had to cover up the gain of function connection. Gain of function is illegal. Gain of function is a crime against humanity. And they were doing it in contradiction to Barack Obama himself's executive order.
Around it for generations, and it hasn't worked. And clearly, COVID-19 pandemic and many other global pandemics that we have come from gain of function research. The RSV epidemic that we have, that is the biggest killer of kids in this country today, came from these kind of experiments. The Lyme disease almost certainly came from this kind of research. So, and the scientists who you say are experts are making the argument that this is necessary for pandemic response, cannot point to one instance in history where research that came out of this kind of experimentation has actually provided us something beneficial.
So how do you prepare then? How do you prepare for the next pandemic? I mean, that's literally part of your job.
Get some sunlight, some vitamin D, develop some good healthy eating habits, strengthen your immune system. That's how we prepare for the next pandemic, Dana.
Now, because experts think it's going to happen within the next 10 years again.
Yeah, I mean, I think we did virtually everything wrong the last time.
So what about now?
The principal thing that we need to do is we need to listen to what's happening to doctors on the ground. There are 15 million frontline physicians around the world. They're mainly now connected through the internet. We can tell on the front lines what's working and what's not. If we had listened to those doctors during the COVID pandemic, we would have saved potentially millions of lives. There were therapeutics out there that were working. There were doctors that were having no deaths from COVID and treating, in some cases, thousands of patients. And we weren't listening to them. Instead, we were doing the opposite. We were shutting them down. And then, Dana, the other thing that I would say is that we need to protect our constitutional rights.
This is big.
That is the primary obligation.
What does that mean?
Well, during COVID, we completely dismantled our constitutional rights. We began censoring people in violation of the First Amendment.
I'm not. You're saying what not to do. I'm asking what to do. But I want to talk about.
That's something to do. That is the number one priority. We protect the Constitution. The Constitution was written.
Forgive me, but you're talking about rights, and I'm asking about a potential public health crisis that is coming. But I do want to
And a public health crisis does not trump my rights. That's the point. That's the point. Because, Dana, you and your ilk and this leftist thinking believe that a public health crisis trumps my rights. That's where you're wrong. That's where you're wrong. Right? If I'm a shop owner and I see a public health threat, I have the right to close my store. You should not have the right to tell me to close my store. That's the difference. Okay. If I'm a shopper, I have a right to shop or not shop. Okay. I have those rights. And in the case of confusion or public health problems or states of emergency, the default should be go back to where power is locally. It should go back to me, the individual walking around with the power to make my own decisions. That's what we should preserve. That's what will get us through everything, not the opposite of, it's a public health crisis, no individual rights. Government gets to tell you everything.
And one of the mistakes we made in the last time was suppressing those rights so people weren't being heard. Doctors who were saying you're doing it wrong were being marginalized and vilified.
Yeah,
and
because again, I really want to move on, but
yeah,
you were saying you were
yes,
I
were
do.
Part of the problem.
No, I wasn't part of the problem.
There was absolute press malpractice. You weren't allowing
Mr. Secretary,
your job
is
a fear of skepticism toward authority. And
Yes,
you weren't
I am.
doing that. You
I
were
am.
beating up
My
on
job is
people who
also
were dissenting.
No. Okay. You want to sit here and attack me, or do you want to have conversations
sitting
about
here and
public health?
attacking me.
I'm not attacking you. I'm asking questions about how to
And let
prevent
me
the next
ask the question,
pandemic.
and I'll tell you.
These questions are so difficult. What a great interview. What a great interview that was. Took myself off the stage. What a great interview that was. So again, fear and skepticism of the government should be your number one position. And they were funding gain of research, which is the whole problem here. Okay. Now, after this interview, Dana Bash, same show, had on one of their scientists. These are one of the scientists that came on for years. He's a contributing author to CNN, Dr. Ashish Jha. ASHISHJA, new word, JHA. I used to pride myself on saying last names correctly. I don't know. At some point, maybe it was when I was in prison, I just stopped caring completely about pronouncing people's names. I mean, when half the guys in there have a nickname like Snotty, it's like, I don't really care how to say his name, right? It's like Snotty. So anyways, so this doctor that was one of the, wet market theorists, natural origin theorists that kind of left the door open for the lab leak theory. He ended up going into the White House under RFK, right, working over there, and he came back on CNN with some pretty, in his, I would say for him, being that he was such a, natural origin person, he was kind of one of the people that CNN would lean on. That this was a pretty big reversal here.
You reshared a tweet that said, among other things, the available evidence overwhelmingly does not show that let me say it this way. You said that the available evidence points towards research-related incidents in Wuhan as the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that we were funding research in an institution where we lacked full transparency into what research was being conducted. You agreed with that?
I did. This is going to surprise some people. When I went into the White House, my view was this was almost surely a natural outbreak, maybe a lab leak. Based on information I learned and based on information I've seen, I have come to conclude that it is more likely to have been a lab leak. Here's the bottom line. No one in the United States knows for sure. The only people who know for sure are officials in China. And we still need transparency and accountability on that. So that is my best assessment. I'm not suggesting I know for sure, but I'm saying my best assessment is that it probably was a lab
leak. Which is the opposite of his assessment before, where it's probably not a lab leak. Okay. It's good. It's good when the news has to get the information out there. Again, 4 years too late. And, people do not have a long memory. Like these same anchors, we play super clips every couple days, right? These same anchors were out there. You must be afraid. You must be, you must get your vaccines. You've got to do all this. And again, what was the net result? Tons of suffering. There was no net benefit to the vaccines. None whatsoever. None, zero, zilch, nada. Okay. Daily Mail, the largest circulated publication in the world, posted a report from the Journal of Sustainable Development Advocates and it's the Journal of Sustainable Development. And Leading Report is reporting on this, and this is kind of the grok summary. Leading Report's post, which says, scientists say we need to have Earth's population to just 4 billion to save the planet, says Daily Mail. So let me pull this up here. Here we go. I got like 10 buttons I have to push. So scientists say we need to have the Earth's population to just 4 billion to save the planet, per Daily Mail. At Leading Reports post on Daily Mail article covering a recent study proposing a gradual reduction of Earth's population from 8.3 to 4 billion by 2200 to ease strains on resources, biodiversity, and climate. The research in the journal Sustainable Development advocates voluntary declines via expanded education, reproductive health care, and women's empowerment rather than coercive policies, framing it as a pro-human path to sustainability. High engagement on that post with 3.6 million views and thousands of quote features, Thanos memes and replies highlighting polarized debates on overpopulation, risk versus economic and aging population concerns. Okay, what I said earlier was once you see it, you can't unsee it. This is one of those things. Over and over and over again, going back many hundreds of years, probably. Again, beware of those who worship death. But going back 30 or 40 years, the climate alarmists and the depopulationists and we're running out of oil, and natural resources folks, they have always advocated this population reduction for collectivists. This is the easiest thing to understand. Everybody has to work to eat according to his needs, right? So you have to need it, aka need food to work. That's the point. If you're working, then you need it. If you don't work, then your means aren't very good and you don't need it. Every collectivist civilization, every collectivist society, one of the reasons that every single one of them soon get associated with things like child sacrifice is because their entire civilization revolves around reducing future populations, sacrificing your children, the future, for today's desires, hedonistic wants. That's what that is, right? We don't want to run out of resources, so we're going to sacrifice the future. We're going to throw our children into the volcano in order to prevent the volcano from exploding, in order to prevent the running out of resources, which, if you listen to Elon Musk, impossible, okay? Or you listen to any of the futurists, pretty much impossible. We're not even close to running out of resources. If you listen to these people, you will end up taking the 6 boosters, and you will encourage other people to take the 6 boosters. You will always be thinking any catastrophe is good because the human parasites will be removed. It is a tale as old as time. Collectivists always end up worshiping death, and their civilizations always get associated with the concept of child sacrifice, sacrificing your future for your present. That's what child sacrifice is, right? It's not always just throwing it on the altar of Moloch. It's entire ways in which our societies operate. Okay. And collectivists are the ultimate hypocrites. This is nothing new, right? If you're listening to this show, I highly suspect I'm preaching to the choir. But here's Mandami in New York, and he's talking about free grocery stores in New York City. The interesting thing about this is in New York City, you do not have to be a citizen to vote. But in order to use these grocery stores, you're going to have to present an ID card. Isn't that interesting? Collectivists want to control the population. They only want services to go to people that vote for them, people that are part of the system. This is the old Bernie Sanders things. Open borders is a co-creation. Yeah, it is. It's kind of a laissez-faire economic policy more than it is a socialist policy per se. But what the socialists are using mass immigration for is power. That's all. They're not using it because economically it makes sense for them. They're using it for power. And so when you see policies like this, where Mandami will adamantly fight against anybody having to present any form, semblance of ID to vote, to come in the grocery stores, you'll need an ID card.
How are you going to keep people from taking advantage of that, that deal, basically? And is there going to be a limit on the number of items that someone can take that are discounted at that level from that essential basket?
So our RFP makes very clear that this is a program for New Yorkers to be able to put food on the table, not a program for people to be able to make a quick buck through reselling. I'm going to pass it over to our EDC head, G Pack, to add some additional details.
Yes, if you look at our RFP for the operator, we are looking to make sure that we target New Yorkers, whether it be at sort of a library card-esque thing, and also ID we card. Manage who's buying and that is focused on everyday New Yorkers. So we are mindful of that. And so we're going to make sure that we have all the things in place to ensure that that does not happen.
How are you going to keep people from taking...
They're going to produce ID cards, like some kind of a New York City library card or something like that. Guys, here's your sign. It's the umpteenth millionth example of, when the policy is against our power, we don't want it. When it's for our power, we want it. They don't really want to provide free groceries to people in New York. They want to provide an impetus for poor people in New York to vote. That's it. That's the whole reason they're doing that. Otherwise, they wouldn't care at all. There's no empathy in their heart. They want to feed people. They want them to vote. And if that means feeding them a little bit, print some money. And that's just what it is, right? Joe Manchin, who I don't have like an incredible amount of respect for Joe Manchin, but he was one of these blue dog Democrats out of West Virginia, right? And he was kind of the wild card Democrat, kind of did the Fetterman thing, except Fetterman's, way more entertaining than Joe Manchin ever was. But, he'd kind of vote across party lines, and he was kind of the guy there to make sure that we still had coal mining and fought against the environmentalists inside the Democrat Party. So he served a really good function as far as, his service in the Senate. But again, it's like why this guy remained a Democrat for so long is beyond me. But, according to him, the Democrat Party has changed. Here's Joe Manchin on Face the Nation talking about how, some of these ideas that socialists have, they sound good and he supports the idea. But when you really get down to it, especially the Democrat Socialists of America, their ideas are retarded because what do they lead to? Exactly what that science journal just released. We need half the population. If that's your working model, that you're trying to reduce the population, half of your policies are going to be destructive.
Heather, could you ever support a self-described socialist candidate?
No.
No way. My God, no.
And even if they have some good ideas?
I support the good ideas, but how could you support some of the crazy stuff they're for? Have you seen their platform? They're for dismantling everything that we know, whether it be the structure of government, Congress itself, or the Senate they want to get rid of. And then they start talking about all the crazy things. No police, no this, no this, no that. Are you crazy? We want a crime-free area. We have to have police for that.
Yeah.
We want a strong defense. We want a strong border. But if Democrats can't say that, and they start lining up with the socialist demands about what you are to be a socialist, energy will be gone. There'll be no energy, okay? We have right now a tremendous amount of energy we're producing, and the world depends more on us than ever before.
So the world depends on us for energy, and you don't want to, decrease the ability to output energy, but the socialist policies are nonsense, right? They are going to lead to all the problems of shortages, mismanagement of resources. There's nothing that these guys are ever going to produce that's worthwhile. And that's the thing. It's just the nature of collectivism. And I'm so glad that Donald Trump has mentioned that this has been a 1,000-year fight. It is the tale as old as time. The fight between the individual and the collective. It's the tale as old as time. And the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence set forward the cause of individuals thousands of years. But there are old forces that want to drag down the individual and collect people for power, whether it's collect people as a voter base in the modern sense, or the ancient base, collect people as a slave labor base. It's the same thing, right? It's the same thing. When you're a voter base, but part of being a voter includes paying taxes, you're just the debt monkey. That's all you are. Any reasonable person can see this. And even a Democrat who's been a business owner, or like I said, the blue dog Democrats, they get it. Given the Democrats' overwhelming amount of confidence going into the midterms and their, ability to peacock and make themselves seem like they got something real going on, they're way behind on money. They're way behind on, polling where they should be in other years where they've taken the midterms. But nonetheless, it's a midterm year and they're just expected to win. Well, with the little fracture inside the Democrat Party, guys, I think there's hope. We've played a couple clips from James Carville. He was on Fox News this time, basically saying the same thing. The Democrat Party's crazy, especially when you start looking at the far left side. He mentions Hassan Piker. He's one of the rabid anti-Semites that's one of the main commentator pundits for the far left.
So where should Democrats draw the line on this stuff?
Whatever Scott Galloway says, I'll believe it. I think that he's one of the smartest, most cogent, brilliant analysts there is. And I'm not sure what to understand what Madame is doing, but to talk about the larger Democratic Party post the election in Michigan going forward, I am not going to be in the same party with Hassan Piker. I can tell you that right now. If he becomes a force in the Democratic Party, I'm out of here. I have no intention of ever being in the same political party with that guy. Now, I think that overwhelming majority of Democrats agree with me. But this idea that we're going to seize the means of production and just go look at the DSA platform. You don't have to look any further than that. And, Jackie, it may be that the two-party system is just going to be under tremendous stress here in the coming months. I mean, you see it in with Tucker and Martin Taylor Greene and on the Republican side. You see it going on right now. And I can't sit here and tell you for certain how this is going to turn out. But the one thing I can tell you for certain, Hassan Piker and James Carville are not going to be in the same political party. One of us is going to leave. It might even be me.
We're gonna have to leave it there, James.
How crazy would it be if James Carville left the Democrat Party? He'd take some people with him, that between the two of them talking about the Democrat Socialists of America being crazy. They are the flagship of the Republican Party. They like he made a fair analysis, the Marjorie Taylor Greene and the Tucker Carlson's the Republican Party and the fracture there. Isn't it nice that our fracture happened like 4 months ago and now we've kind of recovered and it's old news and now it's like, oh, look at the Democrats, they're fracturing. He who fractures last loses. Okay. That's probably the best way to look at this. But that's really interesting. I might leave the party. Wow, that could be powerful. But again, the mainstream Democrats, the ones that are left, they don't support the DSA platform. You're hearing it in their own words over and over and over again. Kevin Hassett, who is the Secretary of, is he the Secretary of Labor? Oh, he's the NEC director. So the NEC director, Kevin Hassett, was on CNBC. And again, as far as how our country's doing in our economics, we're doing pretty well. And he talks about what would happen if the Democrats took over. How would that change how Donald Trump has kind of arranged the trade deals and the different policies?
If the socialists have their way, then the prices won't matter at all because the stores will be empty. That's what happens when you have socialism. And Joe, you'll remember when I was CEA chair before, we put out a chapter in the economic report of the president warning about socialism coming. And I wrote a book called The Drift, Stopping America's Slide to Socialism, because we could see it coming in the first term. And when we did that, when we put out the chapter, the Democrats went nuts and said we were the most partisan White House ever. Well, now they kind of wish they went back and read that chapter because this is what's happening to their party.
Yeah. He went nuts. It's pretty good. Pretty good. Kevin Hassett, I like him. He just seems like a really quiet, kind of steady hand at the till, so to speak. So back to Joe Manchin, finishing off his little interview on Face the Nation. He gets asked about Bernie Sanders. So this is where Bernie Sanders has always been a socialist, right? Like he's always been a socialist and he's run as an independent and then he'll run as a Democrat, run as an independent. But Joe Manchin says in this interview, he says Bernie Sanders used the Democrat name to run, right? To get that 50% liberal voters and then his 10% wacky voters up there in New Hampshire, wherever he's from. So Bernie Sanders has really tainted the Democrat name with socialism. In 2016, he was by far the most popular Democrat, right? By far. Probably should have won the primary over Hillary Clinton. Everybody knows and understands that the DNC primary was rigged for Hillary Clinton. So Joe Manchin makes the point that Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat.
Compete against them.
You know who says it's a rigged system? Bernie Sanders. He's an independent.
Bernie's a socialist now, and I respect Bernie. I respect where he's coming from. Bernie's always been who he is, but he's had to use the Democratic Party to get on the ticket.
Yes.
He took that path. We'll compete again.
Yeah, he had to use the Democrat Party to get on the ticket, and now all the other DSA people are doing the same, and it's making these guys nervous. It's making the old school Democrats nervous because they know that socialism, when properly explained, is completely not popular. All right, so we headed into the weekend last weekend, not really certain where we were at with Iran. And over the weekend, there was another ceasefire called or a stop in the fighting, I guess, or whatever the case is. So that's really good news. The other thing that happened this weekend is Tom Tillis and John Cornyn both said they were going to block Todd Blanche's confirmation, which was supposed to be this week. And mostly this was over the weaponization of government fund. Todd Blanche has said it's over. They're not going to be paying anybody. And then, but then they didn't put it in writing quite the way they wanted. So over the weekend, Todd Blanche did write a Attorney General's memorandum and an order saying that there's no weaponization fund. It's dead, done, over, never going to do it. So that's pretty interesting. So Donald Trump, so it's presumed, I think as I went to bed last night, it was presumed that Todd Blanche would get confirmed this week because of that. But Trump had a little bit of fun with this. He kind of played with it and he was like, hey, if they don't appoint him, I'll do the weaponization fund and I'll spearhead and make sure it goes through.
We have a man named Todd Blanche. He's outstanding in every way. Most of you know who he is. You're not going to find a better person. And everybody, and it's because I backed won his opponent, and his opponent won in a landslide. That's the only reason it's happening. But I will say there are a lot of people that people were hurt so badly. 22 suicides, and they were destroyed. Their families were destroyed. His never been an attack on any group of people in this country, in my opinion. Maybe one. There's one group that was attacked violently and viciously, like these people were attacked. And this would be a reimbursement for the pain that they suffer. A lot of people like it. If they don't approve Todd, I put it back on the table. A lot of people like it.
Now, I got to tell you, being that I might be subject to that weaponization fund, group of people that they've targeted like nobody else ever. Hello, I did it. Do we side with the resistance, folks? Okay. He'll put it back on the table. I don't really like feeling like a bargaining chip, personally. I'm kind of done being the bargaining chip, the non-volunteering bargaining chip all the time. I don't really love that, but it'll be back on the table if they don't approve him. And it sounds like they're going to. It sounds like he, checked the boxes on the paperwork to say there's no more weaponization fund. Oh, well, I guess it is what it is. Very interesting story coming out of Texas. Carlitos, I hope you're ready for this. Down in Houston, you got a problem. You had an unlicensed funeral director that is involved in a forgery case. This is a 2 News report out of Houston. This is really good. A transgender man was running a funeral home, and somebody passed away of natural causes, and the family, who was mostly out of town, hired this funeral home to take care of his funeral, and they turned over some legal paperwork, which apparently gave this funeral director some form of a power of attorney, and then the story just gets weirder from there.
That's how Unique Green stormed out of the courtroom Friday morning.
I don't have nothing to say.
But asked how Green made an $800,000 bond earlier this week, Green didn't have many answers. But what about those forged documents prosecutors say got filed to steal the estate of Lawrence Gammon?
Did your mother forge them? Did your mom forge them?
No answers there either. When Houston police raided Green's funeral home in the 3rd Ward, investigators allegedly found a Home Depot bucket full of organs. And what about those?
They were for you to eat for lunch.
Green is now free from jail on 5.
What happened?
Felony charges, in addition to allegedly forging paperwork to claim the estate of a man who passed away last summer, which included his home, vehicles, and
everything's being really slow here. I'm having some kind of... All right, we'll hit play again.
Retirement accounts. Green is also accused of forging paperwork to the State Funeral Commission for funeral director and embalming licenses.
She has always claimed her innocence, that she's not guilty, and that's an explanation for all this evidence against her.
So for now, Green is out of jail on bond and ordered not to engage directly or indirectly in planning any end-of-life services in Harris County. That includes not accepting any money for those services or holding.
All right. Apparently I can't tell if it's my internet that's choppy. It probably is my internet. It's not very good here. I don't know what's going on. Not 100% sure why I'm so choppy, but I don't know if you guys were able to hear that story very well. Interesting story. Funeral director falsified everything. It's kind of darn it. Why did I just do that? Funeral director falsified everything. It's pretty crazy. Okay, and I just did a wonderful thing. I just totally closed out my last couple slides, and I'm left with one. So we'll just jump to the end here. The other 2 slides were just kind of informational things, but I can't quite get this thing. Okay. All right. I'm having broadcast issues here. I'm having all kinds of broadcast issues here. Let's see if it remedies itself pretty quickly. I don't think it's going
for the country. I didn't make for me. I made for the.
Okay, let's see if I can. Okay, so this is President Trump on Air Force One. All right, this is going to be our last clip. So this is President Trump on Air Force One. Interesting things are happening in the big macroeconomic picture, right? There's a lot of stuff going on with the different bond markets. Some of this stuff is hard to follow, and I do feel commonly, because I do see the headlines, you'll have like bond market crashes or buyouts, and there's always these people that are like, that's it, it's crashing. It's like, oh, these guys are good at kicking the can down the road. The bond market, or the yen swap carry trade, as they call it, essentially a lot of big international companies or even governments will go borrow yen, then they buy dollars, and there's an exchange differential there, and there's an arbitrage, and it basically, the yen is kind of like the original source of credit, which then creates other credit instruments and other fiat currencies around the world. So it's just another one of this nonsense ledger entries that creates money. Okay. Well, the Japanese market has been having real catastrophic issues, like end of the financial system type ups and downs in their bond rate. And, they've reached the too much debt kind of problem. So the United States, similar to what it did to Argentina, I think it was earlier in this year, they did a currency swap. So basically we took some of their yen off their books, not buying it, swapping it to give them dollars, which allows them to then pay their bonds, which will prop them up a little longer, kick the can down the road, and then we do some swap back and we make money. So when we did it with Argentina, we made money. So Donald Trump's on Air Force One getting asked about, why are you propping up the yen? Again, for the doomers out there, that was like the beginning of the end. And now it's propped up. So we've just kicked the can down the road. So here's Trump talking about that, as well as some other things.
Getting out of that arrangement. Financial benefit. Financial benefit. It's also good for the world economy. But we make, like when we did with Argentina, I got criticized. We made $25 billion on that deal. With Venezuela, we make hundreds of billions of dollars. I make good deals. Intel, I made $75 billion for the country. I didn't make for me, I made for the country. Intel, I backed Intel. It's the hottest stock right now on the New York stock, on the various stock exchanges. So we made about $75 to $80 billion. Japan wanted to, it was really more than anything else, it was a signal of friendship. Because the yen is weakening and the dollar is doing great. The fact is, our country is doing great. Everybody wants help from our country.
Sometimes I wonder if he's more of a cheerleader. We're doing great. Yeah, you're the tallest midget in the room, bro. Like, everybody's short. The fact that he says, it's just a sign of friendship. It was a bailout. We bailed out the nation of Japan, just like we bailed out Argentina. Now, can we make a monetary profit? Sure. Yeah, absolutely you can. The problem is, where'd that money come from? It's not gold or silver. It's not increased productivity. It's a swap. It's a money game, right? And it props up the system quite a bit more. It's another one of these we should all be paying very close attention to this. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me today on a bright and early Monday morning.